welcome back to Logical Magic, examining esoterica. Hey guys, we have one that is pure fun today. Bethany Nicole, who has been with me for several serious subjects, is back today to talk about her new book, The Secret Energetics of Relationships. And is it energetics like thermodynamics and physics and some of the ways that we would normally associate with the words energetics? Yes, actually it is. It's moved into a personal realm. Remember, everything is energy. We are energy, you are energy. Energy in relationships is an important thing, and you can learn how to master it as well. So before I get started, let's get on with the housekeeping today, because I'm Alane. You can find me at therisingmoon.com for a life coaching session or a tarot card reading. Cronecast at the Rising Moon is the YouTube version of my tarot reading business, but also put the video versions of these interviews and these segments and discussions up there as well. And then you can always find my Patreon linked below in the episode notes or the description box down below. Bethany Nicole is someone she is a tarot card reader as well, but she's also an astrologist. She's someone who really focuses on relationships. And do I not focus on relationships? I do relationship reading, but I'm more of a life's purpose reader, and I help people emotionally heal and get into the shape so that they can go to Bethany for finding their soulmate and understanding their relationships. All readers will have different focuses, and it's not that we can't go outside that. For instance, I do a lot of spirit mediumship at this point through tarot. We all have an area that we're really drawn to, but most of us can expand beyond it. However, I think when it comes to something as particular as love, it really is a good idea to go to somebody who focuses on that if you're searching for a relationship, if you're trying to mend the relationship that you're in. So, without any more preamble, Bethany, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad to have you back. Tell me about this book. What led you to write it?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of just, as books tend to do, it kind of came through me more than to me, I guess. And I have another book, Apologies I Never Got, that is going the traditional publishing route. And so it's just been such a process of like finding agents and doing everything. And then this book just kind of, I don't even know how to explain it. It was just such a process of it was like it wanted to come through, it wanted to come out, and it wanted to do it right now. And so um, it was great. Even as I was writing it, I was seeing kind of videos and things on Instagram and TikTok of people talking about their relationships or dates, and all of the things they were talking about were being answered in the book that I was writing. So I was like, oh, it wants to come out now. It really had its own kind of path. And it's just so much of what I already do, especially with the astrology and the compatibility. It's like, when we talk about what is actually beneath all of that, that's what we're looking at is the energy of what's going on in people's lives and their relationships and their compatibility. When you talk about zodiac compatibility, that's what we're talking about. The energy of Aries meets the energy of Scorpio, and how does that interact? I mean, that's really what we're getting to the bottom of. And so that's kind of what this book really talks about. It's like the basic energetics of relationships and interactions and pretty much all of the things.
Which is part of the reason that focusing on your own emotional healing, and we all have something to emotionally heal before you head towards a relationship, because you'll bring that energy into a relationship. And it doesn't mean you have to be a hermit, you don't have to be a monk in between. But if you deal with whatever's holding you back from true connection first, then when you go towards relationships, when you make it more of your focus, you're going to attract like energy. The like energy attracts like energy is a real thing. And you're talking about something being channeled or being a conduit for some information for the collective. When something enters the national conversation, it is an element of focus. For instance, this like the word privilege was something that just entered everybody's vocabulary about 10 years ago. And you'll see things like that. It isn't just that we're exposed to trends and then everybody starts talking about something. There is a collective, what is it, energy that influences what we are focusing on and our personal power. And particularly for the feminine divine, there has been a greater emphasis on finding the right relationships, being treated properly in relationships, having reciprocal relationships, letting go of bad relationships. There's a national conversation and an international conversation around relationships. So, Bethany, what do you have to share from this particular work? What do people need to know about this?
Yeah, I mean, it really is everything that you just said. I have included in it what I call the dating funnel process. And this is how I teach people to raise their relationship bottom lines, because that really is so much of what we see in the collective, in the conversations, and what we find so confusing. When people say, like, is this okay about a date? Is that okay about the date? It's giving them that clarity of, like, if you don't feel okay about it, then no. Like,
Yeah,
and
if you're asking a question about it, chances are good the answer
it's
is no.
probably a no, yeah.
Is
But
if you're phrasing a question in your head, "Is this okay?" Then a part of you already knows,
so it's
not
probably not.
okay with
Yeah.
me."
Yeah, and so this is energetically creating a new bottom line, right? We have energetic ceilings, we have energetic bottoms, and so that's really what the dating funnel is doing on both ends. It's creating a deal maker or a deal breaker's bottom and then giving them that deal maker's kind of top. So you're really just shifting your entire energetic arena up a level and creating a whole new dating and relationship paradigm for yourself, because that is so much of what we see is that we're just kind of like getting on dating apps, and whatever shows up we're like, well, I guess this is what's meant for me. And or we're letting our emotions completely guide the process, when in fact we're supposed to be channeling our emotions. We're supposed to be in control of those things. We hear a lot, well, you can't help how you feel, and that's accurate, but we should be looking at our emotions as something, as a guide, not the thing to be running the show. So if you're, really emotionally caught up with somebody, but they have all of these, things going on, it doesn't matter how much of a connection you feel with them. There's going to be a point where you just can't stay with them.
Yeah.
And so the deal breakers are helping you recognize what some of those things are so you can channel your emotions in a different direction. So these people aren't even getting past your first row of filters because, especially things like, the things that we know you can't get past. Like if you want kids and somebody else is like, I'm done. I've had a vasectomy. I don't want any kids. Like, why are you interacting with them if you're on completely different? It doesn't matter what your connection is, because you'll hit a wall. Eventually you will get to that point where they don't want kids and you do. And now, you're breaking up or whatever.
And be super, super careful of, because people do that hoping that like the other person will find such a deep connection with them that they will change their mind. And it is not a good plan to do that, because if somebody changes something for you, they invariably end up resenting you for it if it doesn't go smoothly. And guess what? Hardly ever goes absolutely smoothly: having children. Like, honest to goodness, it's not that it's a bad experience, but it is a varied and a difficult and a challenging one. And you don't want to persuade somebody to take that into their lives. You want somebody who is like, yes, it will be tough, but it will be rewarding. These are things that if you have standards around your relationships, does that then mean that you end up alone if people don't meet those standards? Maybe. But if you've done all your work, you can find as much joy in being by yourself as you ever would be. If you had the wrong person, that joy is eroded day after day after day. There are a lot of reasons not to try and make Mr. Make Do. You don't want to do that, because it gets worse over time. An accumulated energy gets worse over time. And what Bethany is talking about with paradigms is something that's incredibly important when people have done their emotional healing work. Is if you have come out of a lot of toxicity, like I came out of a lot of toxicity, I've talked about it a great deal. I'm lucky to be a functional person, but I did that for myself. I had to put myself together like an IKEA bookshelf that was missing several screws, but I managed to make a really strong foundation. But that's not the same thing as knowing how to then have relationships with other people. And I think, Bethany, what you're talking about is that what your book is talking about is, if you don't have the ability, or you don't have the knowledge, or you simply have the interest in structuring an energetically healthy and sound relationship, your book helps with that, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It tells you pretty much through the dating funnel kind of how to create that. And then we also get into, I kind of call it the energetic elevator. So it's talking about when you're having in these dating and relationship paradigms that most of the time we don't even know we're in, right? Because they're usually formed very early, or we're just very desensitized. That is kind of like dating on one floor of an office building.
Mhm.
And you're going into different offices, but they're all the same, right? Because it's the same energetic floor, right? It's just like a sea of accountants, let's say, and maybe they specialize in different things and they wear different things. but it's the same energetic, and you're reenacting you're co-creating the same patterns with them, you're having the same interactions. And what you're not realizing is that you're kind of that common denominator because you're dating in a relationship paradigm that is matching that frequency. So, what we're talking about when we're healing or when we're creating a new paradigm for ourselves is getting back into the elevator, doing the work we need to do. So, we're raising our frequency. Then, when we're coming back out, ready to date again, we're on a completely different floor, so to speak. So, you're not running into the same things. Or if one does get through, because that it's a lot like an algorithm, it can take a little while to kind of get caught up with
To
kind
build
of your
the
new
skill, build
reality.
the skill set. The
Right. Then you know what to do with it because you are the different piece of that. So you're recognizing it, you're picking up on that blueprint of, if I think in the book I use a floor of like narcissist because that's such a common one.
Mhm.
Um, but if you've done the work and you've elevated and you go to the next floor, so to speak, even if there is kind of someone with those tendencies on this next round of dating, you're picking up on it right away and you're going, "Oh no, you belong back on the on the fourth floor. I'm on the fifth floor now. We're not doing this."
You're spotting your red flags where they're still the size of like a little sandwich holder thing
Right,
instead of
right,
the bed sheet flying over the car dealership size red flag. You
right.
spot the wrong ones early, and so you don't invest time and get your emotions entangled with people who haven't done their work or aren't right for you or representing an earlier stage of your life. And one of the things that you have to remember is if you never saw it in your experience of being formed, of growing up, anything that rises above the standard of your formative experience seems fantastic. And I'm like the best example of that. I have described like my ridiculous child. I mean, I didn't have a refrigerator at one point, didn't have a water heater for 2 years. I mean, it was ludicrous. It is almost like being a Dickens character. And I do find it funny now because time and distance and healing, and I'm fine. But it did mean that anybody who rose above the standards of extreme abuse was like seemed like a prince to me. And
Yeah,
that is a very, very normal thing. Mine is an extreme example and it's easy to spot. But almost everybody has that is that we have a tendency to repeat patterns, and that the thing that is a little bit better than the pattern we're escaping can be better, but not the best you can achieve yet. And when we're
mhm,
talking about the energy of relationships and energetics and learning how to manage that so that you don't overinvest your energy in the wrong circumstances, is really what can get you closer to the relationship that you're truly dreaming of. Too
yeah,
often, we superimpose what we want somebody to be on them because we have an emotional need that we haven't learned how to meet ourselves. And maybe you can't help how you feel, but you can understand why you feel it. And when you understand why you feel it, quite frequently, your feelings change because it's no longer a mystery to you. It's no longer this, like, what did I, or how did I get that bruise? Instead, you know exactly how, and then you know how to avoid getting it again. And that is part of the idea of it. I love the language that you're using around this with the relationship funnel and the bottom line.
yeah.
Um, and this mostly came to you, but you've done this work for a while, so you had a good base knowledge, right?
Yeah, and I had done the dating funnel process. I'd implemented it with some of my clients, and it was something that I used on myself and completely changed my own relationship paradigm. And so I know it works. I've seen it work, and I was like, I need to like share this because it really is just such a common problem. And you hear it when you are looking at like TikTok or Instagram, people are saying it over and over and over. And it's like, I think the struggle is that a lot of us are, even if it's not an extreme example, a lot of us are used to dating and having relationships well below where we should be. So our minimum standard is even being treated well or being safe in a relationship. That is like bare minimum. We should be, dating above that. We should be finding higher levels of connection. And that can take a little bit of a process, right? But it's also a mindset shift because if you've dated or been in relationships or grew up in a family where being treated well or being safe was like a goal you were trying to reach, then you can really, that to you feels like, oh, this is everything. But in fact, it's actually what we should be utilizing as our bare minimum, as our minimum standard. And we should start practicing that so that we can go higher and higher with our relationships because we are always evolving. And the problem that we see with people who are setting their highest standard at safety or being treated well is that we're always evolving, we're always growing. Think about like in jobs or apartments, like, that apartment that you was your dream place, suddenly you're like, wow, this is too small. I don't fit in here anymore. Or that city that overwhelmed you, you're like, gosh, I'm so bored of it now. Like we're always doing that. And so there will be a point where this person that you feel safe and treated well by, you kind of outgrow it. You're like, yeah, I mean, I feel so bad because they're so great, but we don't connect past that. Like I don't feel that higher level of connection. And so then it's kind of that process repeating over and over and people thinking that they're mutually exclusive. Like I either have this high level of connection with someone who's bad for me or I have safety with someone I'm not interested in. And it's like, no, no. Like, if you can combine those things through the dating funnel to create the relationship that you want, that is both safe, treats you well, and has a higher emotional, physical, intellectual connection that you're looking for. They're not exclusive. They're only exclusive because we've made them that way, but they're not inherently like that.
Yeah, the idea that people rise to the level of expectation
Right.
is there as well, and that when now can we like very briefly discuss very briefly when we're talking about me and I sneeze and 800 words come out, but we're going to talk a little bit about what causes so much narcissism, which is more common in men than it is in women. I'm not trying to be gendered; it's just that is a psychological fact being proven through study. What one of the root causes of it is that we live in a society that tells men that they are more important to society than women are. And so they think they're more important and our needs are ridiculous and we're emotional and they're taught to believe all of these things that are not conducive or conductive to having strong relationships. But times have changed. People's understanding of themselves have changed. People's expectations of relationships have changed. And Bethany's book is one of the things that can help you have a relationship that meets the healthier standards of today when we are no longer looking for relationships primarily for safety and security. And that is another part of it is that we are evolving past a stage. And guys, it's really recent that the idea of getting married had to do with romance. That romantic love was the primary thing, and companionship and being married to your best friend was the primary thing that you were trying to achieve. Before there was a concept of equality, women sought relationships for a safe place within this world because they had very little power of their own. And this is still a developing part of our world. As we develop, we want to have things come into our lives, relationships and connections come into our lives that better reflect our forward thinking. No, I don't need to do that. I can make my own money. I can provide my own security. I don't need somebody to protect me. In fact, you want to hold my purse while I kick some ass. We know how to do that now. And we need to find the men. And, we are talking in very gendered terms, but it doesn't have to do with simply being, heterosexual or cisgender. This is in all relationship paradigms is you want to find somebody with whom you have an equal emotional reciprocity where your level of investment is matched by their level of investment, your level of attraction is matched by their level of attraction. And we have a society that is overcoming literally all of written and remembered history, overcoming a relationship dynamic that did not actually prize relationships primarily by the connection. And we do now. And so that's why the work that Bethany is doing is so incredibly important and why her book can be so helpful because we're talking about an entirely new concept of relationships for the modern world to have us more emotionally fulfilled, more sexually fulfilled, more everything in terms of why there should be a bottom line that you should not go below. Because whenever you do, you have the past relationship instead of the forward thinking relationship, one that matches your new energy for all of the work that you've done. Bethany, again, you've done this for a while, so you've seen all of the narcissist empath paradigms, which we're talking about that being the lowest common denominator. And how would you describe the relationship that people are looking for? What do they need to look for in it?
As far as the ideal relationship,
Yeah,
or
the
yeah,
ideal relationship, what the point of reading a book about how to attract an energetic relationship might be for somebody.
absolutely. So what I really kind of hammer on in the book are sort of the main points that our relationships should be evolving us. That is kind of the point of them. It's transformation, evolution. We're looking at these higher ideals, right? We're looking at people that inspire us, that elevate us. Like we're talking even emotionally and energetically on a completely different level than what we've been operating on. So that's what I really hammer in. Then I also really hammer on that we're in control of this ultimately, that we are co-running programs, that our dating life is an algorithm, that we can control literally all of this. So when we talk about the empath narcissist kind of dance, my book is really kind of catered more towards empaths because that's going to be the people who are really drawn to metaphysical and energetic kinds of books, right?
Also, the
And
people who had to heal and know and need instruction on how to do this.
right, right. And so it really is getting very clear about, things like you can understand someone's kind of reasoning, but not tolerate their behavior. You can have compassion for their experience without allowing them to continue it. And I talk about too, even just kind of the kinder thing as far as being an empath, recognizing that somebody who's acting out these patterns is in pain. They are acting out these patterns and this poison to try to alleviate that pain. But it is an ineffective method of healing. Because if it were effective, they would have healed themselves, right? Like if, for example, they're kind of narcissistic and they yell because they grew up in a home where there was a lot of yelling, right? And so now they're yelling at you. You understand that logic. You understand why they would be exhibiting that behavior, but you also can understand this is not healing them because otherwise they would not be doing it. There would be some limit they could hit where, okay, I've yelled enough and now I feel better. But there is no limit. It just goes on. So if you look at it from that standpoint, it's actually a very ineffective way of healing. So it's not healing them, it's hurting you. Where's the benefit? The illusion is that it is somehow kind to allow them to continue this behavior. That the illusion is that your kindness is allowing them to work through this and you're having compassion for them because you're allowing them to yell at you, but that's not the reality. You're actually doing more damage by allowing them to do that, which is kind of what we're talking about with the narcissist or kind of what our society has done with men. We think it looks like the men are getting what they want, but it's just like the kid who eats all the chocolate cake. They're not benefiting. It's an illusion. They're not benefiting. We're not benefiting. Nobody is benefiting from this. And it's not kind to allow them to continue that behavior. And they have continued that behavior because it's worked, right? It's been effective.
Exactly.
If it didn't, they wouldn't be doing it. So if you're really looking at it from a higher level of empath, of like an empath compassion level, stopping that behavior and it doesn't mean that you have to go in and explain to them why, but your absence, you're not engaging with it is teaching them this does not work and I'm not allowing it. So you need to find another method to work through this because this isn't it. And that's actually far more compassionate than allowing this kind of toxic cycle. And for empaths, especially, sometimes that is really how you can get them on board with raising their bottom line. Because otherwise, I think a lot of empaths have that fear of like, oh, I'm leaving somebody behind, or I'm leaving them to deal with this all by themselves, or like I'm abandoning somebody. But if you can get them like on the right path as far as like, no, this is the higher level of work, this is what they need to be able to elevate themselves as well. This is the kinder thing. Then they're like, oh, yeah, I see that. Okay, I can like get on board with that.
Um, and of course, what we have to remember is that it's the difference between enabling and empowerment. And quite frequently, when people put up with a behavior like somebody yells, screams, accuses them, they think that that person will love them more for accepting them with all their warts and flaws. And they won't, because they're just a really damaged person who's walking around perpetuating their damage. And you were talking a little bit about the difference between a painkiller, which is not healing. A
Mhm.
painkiller just alleviates a symptom temporarily, but the underlying issue or injury is still there. So you always want to go towards healing versus a painkiller. whenever you can. And if you're in a relationship where somebody hasn't done their work, please remember there's something called karmic relationships. They're coming into your life to teach you a standard for how you wish to be treated and what you will accept and what you won't accept. And sometimes you will be able to, someone will see the error of their ways and willingly change because they wish to be a better and healthier version. But if they don't, then it is important to allow them to go on their way. And there is something called a transference relationship that is incredibly common in abuse circles as well, in abuse recovery. It sometimes will be the twin flame paradigm, where you have a tremendous attraction to somebody who is like the person that, unfortunately caused the damage in the first place. But there are ways to resolve it. It's not fatal. And you can actually have a twin flame connection where you're a very healthy person, and then, but there's very little drama with it. Like, you can have that magnetic attraction with somebody where there's no emotional circus in the background. But one of the things that we're talking about with the healthy energetics of relationships is also understanding how the flawed ones manifest. And
Yeah.
that is one of them, which is where, people don't know how to have conflict like irrational adults. They get frightened, or they get defensive, or they were raised in a home environment where, like, they had to be right to feel safe, as a for instance, can cause some of these behaviors. But Bethany, like, you've seen people go from the relationship to the relationship, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so interesting that you brought up the karmic relationships because that's absolutely in the book as well. I talk about that. And I do talk about exactly what you're saying, where you can have these higher levels of connection without the drama. And once again, this is like the duality that we've created in our own minds, that we think those things are mutually exclusive. But what my book really, yeah, kind of talks about is that you can have a sustainable higher level connection without the massive lows. You can learn to anchor in a higher emotional and energetic experience without kind of self-sabotaging it. I compare it to kind of, again, with those energetic ceilings and emotional ceilings, that we're not used to having higher levels of emotion because we're taught that's unstable.
Mhm.
And we experience it as unstable in a lot of ways. So it's kind of like when you talk about people who win the lottery. If they're not prepared to kind of anchor in that sort of abundance or success, if there's self-sabotage or whatever, then it's like the lottery winner who like gives all their money away or loses it, or it's like the one hit wonder, the celebrity who suddenly is like an alcoholic or says something terrible and gets themselves canceled. It's like they just can't sustain it because there's senses of deservingness, or they're taught, oh, this won't last, or like the honeymoon's going to end, or like, oh, that's too good to be true. And so people panic with these higher levels of emotion and connection, and they self sabotage, or, they think, oh, well, there must be something wrong. So what my book is talking about is like, no, when you begin to create a new bare minimum for yourself, you're going to also start creating a higher level of what you can pull in and anchor into your reality. And when you're funneling kind of emotions and learning how to like manipulate that energy, then now you're talking about these higher levels of connection that don't have to come with all of these lows, that you're creating a relationship that you can comfortably sustain, even if it's outside of your emotional comfort zone, even if it's something new to you, even if the connection feels really out of this world. You can learn how to anchor that into your reality and sustain it over however long the relationship goes. It doesn't necessarily mean that the relationship's going to be, forever. And that's another thing I talk about, is that, what constitutes a truly successful relationship. It's not time.
Mhm.
And so, but yeah, that's kind of really when you start setting that minimum and start working with energetic blueprints like Inspire and elevation and evolution and connection and soulmate connection, where you're really getting high of these emotions. Because when we experience something new for the first time, it's very frightening, but there's a first time that we experience romantic love. And a lot of us have a hard time dealing with that. If you think, most first loves are very intense, very dramatic, very high, very low, because it's our first time experiencing that high level of emotion. But what my book talks about is that There's more to our experience than what we're taught. We're taught to stay in this very safe realm of emotion and experience and connection because that's what we consider safe, and that's what keeps us in, kind of these really banal 9 to 5 type relationships where we're like, "Well, I guess this is like we're not fighting, so I guess this is like as good as it gets." And my book is saying, what if we moved past that? What if we took it to the next level? What if we could have high level connection and emotion that is not brought around or brought down by these lower levels as well? What if we could go and learn to differentiate between karmic connections and soulmate connections? What if we can learn to like experience high levels of emotion and anchor that into our reality and make it our normal, make the banal higher? Like, what if we could do that? And that's what we're getting at with the book.
Well, and one of the things that you're referring to does actually the idea that the test of a relationship, the worthiness or the worth of a relationship has to do with the duration of it. That we overinvest in the idea of permanence as the long-term goal of a relationship. And that does come from the please revisit what I said about 20 minutes ago about historically, in particular, women had to seek relationships for safety and for comfort in this world and to have more rights and more power and to be protected. But we're no longer in that world, and that's why moving beyond the idea of comfort, safety, and security for relationship into true connection and true compatibility and true passion. And when you are not seeking relationships for safety or security, you worry less about how long this will last, and instead you enjoy the relationship for what it is worth while it is worthwhile. And if it ceases to be worthwhile, then you're less reluctant to release it and go on to potentially your next relationship. You're not invest because that's what keeps people in bad relationships is thinking that they have to have a partner to be happy, to be safe, to be viewed as worthy within this world. And so they keep trying to keep the half dead patient alive on the comatose respirator when it comes to how emotionally worthwhile this relationship is because we have been taught to fear being alone. And so one of the first things we have to do is learn to work with and coexist with and overcome our own fear about that. And then you will meet somebody who is also having relationships for the right reasons. And that is
Mhm.
not to say that like we've all engaged in this because we're programmed to, and to please remember the whole formative experience that teaches you how to approach relationships does not stand alone. It is a societal undercurrent. Every place that you go will have a different relationship to what love is supposed to be, and relationships, and marriage, and even having children, and that it is a societally programmed response. And one of the things that you want to do when you're working with your own best energy is to recognize that as this influenced me, this made me think that. I'm going to put it on a shelf and I'm going to figure out who I really am, what I really want, what I really feel. And when we're talking about bottom line relationships or the funnel, the dating funnel, that is a key part of it is understanding self first so that you can recognize when someone isn't right. That like every now and then there will be a situation where you do want to compromise on something because compromise is part of a healthy relationship. We don't just get to have it our way. Compromise does is an important thing, but you want to make sure you're having equal sides where they compromise sometimes and you compromise sometimes. And too often what happens with the empath narcissist paradigm is the empath compromises and compromises and compromises and compromises and compromises, thinking that will make the narcissist just value them so much. In reality, because at the heart of narcissism is a feeling of self-loathing, because there genuinely is, they don't have true self-esteem, they're looking for it in other people. If you are someone's constant source, the person who's always putting themselves second, they will start to see you as having less value in their lives. So it's a no-win equation. And Bethany's book and the work that Bethany does, it is normal, it is natural, and it is human to want connection and to want love. There is nothing wrong with you. That is not part of societal programming. Seeking love is a normal thing. Needing love is something that needs to be healed. Wanting to have love in your life, to have the experience, is something that Bethany's book can help you with so you can get the best experience and the best outcomes. And Bethany, you've had your own journey with all of this as well, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that's really where, the dating funnel kind of created itself was through my own experience and learning how to do that for myself because I had, because of the way I grew up and the different interactions with my own family, I just had such a low bottom line. And I also have so much intensity in my emotions and in my relationships that it just took a while for me to figure out how to kind of channel it all in the right direction. And that was really when I started to be able to kind of control and manipulate that energy was when I started creating that bottom line. And
Can I add something here? I'm sorry to cut you off, but
oh,
it's something important about what you're talking about that neither of us have, like, attached the words to it yet. Bethany's funnel and bottom line, everybody who has been through the non-reciprocal relationship, or if I give absolutely everything to them, they will value me even more instead of it being even less. It will give you back the ability to trust your judgment again, because it will give you some rules around judgment that has been badly misused. And it's not your fault that you might have had poor judgment in the past. That is an issue of programming. But
mhm,
what Bethany is talking about is so many people don't want to go towards a relationship because they don't really trust themselves after bad relationships. And
yeah.
Bethany has a method for helping you learn how to have an exterior filter for your own judgment until your ability to have trust in your own judgment is reestablished. And that's actually what Bethany's book helps you do.
Yep, I call it like a synthetic boundary. So the first level of it is the deal breakers, and that's really kind of that bottom line, and it's exactly what you're talking about. It's creating that so you can learn to trust your judgment again, and creating these boundaries for yourself that sometimes it's a little bit fake it till you make it because you haven't seen to believe that there could be a relationship that you have that doesn't involve these other components, especially if you're very desensitized to it, right? Like if you grew up in a family where there was a lot of yelling, you might not be able to see to believe just yet that you could have a relationship that doesn't include that.
Right.
This is giving you a synthetic boundary. So, like, even if you're like, I'm not 100% on this, it's like something that you can look at and look at that deal breaker and be like, no, this is like, this is it, and you're establishing that. And so it gives you kind of that help in holding the boundary until you can start to see it to believe it. And it really happens very quickly once you go on a few dates or get into a relationship where you're on the other side of that boundary. And then it locks itself in so much so that it just becomes part of your energy and you're not even attracting people like that anymore. And so the example I always use, or the one that really kind of helped me create this process, was I kept getting into relationships with people that had like a variety of substance abuse issues, which is like very common as far as like where I grew up. I struggled with my own stuff with that, and I just wasn't. I was just so desensitized to it that it was like not registering basically, and that's what I talk about in the book. I call it the OF factor, and that we get too desensitized to recognize it. So we're ending up with people that other people would weed out more quickly because they would be like, "Oh, this guy has like a substance abuse issue." Whereas like to me, I was like, "Oh, that's like normal," you know? And so it was like getting through the gate. Um and so this all came about. I had just kind of started working with a psychic who was helping me open my intuition back up. And so I was working with her, and I just had this like really gnarly breakup with a guy that I had this really, he was definitely a karmic partner, 100% past life karmic partner for days, right? And he had this like awful substance abuse issue that like became apparent like pretty quickly. Um, and so I was talking to her about it, and she just was like, well, why are you even dating someone that has who's using substances at all? Like, you're trying to do this work, you can't have both. You can't have someone with that going on around this intuitive type of work. You'll attract kind of lower energies. And I was like, it was just like a light bulb in my head where I was like, why am I dating somebody that has this going on? I have no idea. Like, I never thought about it that way until she said it, and, like, especially because I was at that point in my life, I was, like, cutting it out of my own life. I was like, "I need to be completely sober because I don't handle this stuff well either." And
Lots of
so
sensitive people don't, by the
and
way.
lots of people don't, and especially when you're doing this type of work, I mean, a lot of people learn that
I
very
don't
quickly.
drink. I like, yeah, no, most of this, I think
Yeah, we
French
can't
guys, most
control the
psychics don't do
energy.
much of anything because
Yeah,
you
it's
need
hard
energy.
to. But yeah, so that was like my aha, like I just had no idea. And so I set that synthetic boundary for myself and I was like, okay, that's like a but like keeping in mind it would have been very outside of my realm of possibility to have because I just had so many people in my dating past that had kind of these things going on, whether it was like this guy's was very extreme, but like even so. And so I kind of had that boundary and I went on a date with somebody and we were in the middle of this LA restaurant and he's telling me that I don't know how he even made it through my filters, but like he's telling me that he uses a substance, it was a legal substance, but that he used it multiple times a day. And I just like in the middle, I kid you not, of this LA restaurant, like yelled it to the heavens. I was like, this does not work for me. And so like, the guy was like, wow, that's really rude. Like, that's really judgmental. And I was like, I don't care. I can't do this anymore. And like, so I literally like
God.
I know, this guy looked at me like I was insane, but it was like this synthetic boundary that I had put in place where I was like, I hadn't quite seen it to believe it, but I was like, I'm not doing this. And so I put it in place and I screamed it out and um totally offended this guy. I didn't even care. I got the check and left. Like,
Never seen the guy who
um,
cares.
and he told every like he was like, "Wow, that's really rude. That's very judgmental. That's totally illegal here."
Yeah,
I
it's standard. I must
not a big
go.
deal. The standard stuff, and I was just like, I don't care. Like, I just don't care. And I literally that night I cleared that pattern. It never. I don't attract them anymore. I've never had someone else come in with anything like that, and that was like I don't know. 5 years ago, whatever it was. And that was like when that kind of experience was like, oh
Just
my God, this is how you do it. This is how it works. And it really does. And then once I got on the other side of that and was dating people that didn't have that going on, you're like, I don't know. Like you really are just like, what was I thinking? But it's just so like, I was born into it. I was raised around it. It was
normalized. It was
so
normal.
much part, and not even like necessarily my family of origin, although that too, but like, I grew up in Western North Carolina, it's Appalachia. That is like, even when I go back to visit, the entire culture, not the whole culture, but a lot of it is around whiskey and moonshine and there's just not like much else to do. So people are like, even when I go back to visit, sometimes people kind of like don't know what to do with me because they're like, well, it's gonna say let's go to this brewery, and it's like I don't really want to do that, like I don't drink. I can sit there with you, but like, um, so it just, I mean, it just wasn't. It was just so normalized to me that I didn't have that factor around. Oh, this is not okay, and people do that. That's like a substance thing, but people do that with all kinds of stuff, and it can
Whether or
just
not someone's really divorced, there's like, and you're illustrating something that like I'm positive people have heard me say all over my YouTube channel and likely on the podcast before, is when you first learn to set your boundaries, expect it to be inelegant. And
yeah.
you learn how to set them first with a bazooka. No, this does not work for me.
The whole restaurant's like turning to look at you like
But it's a crucial, crucial part of getting the relationships that you will have like rewarding experiences with, knowing when to say a firm no. And eventually you learn to be like, oh, that's very interesting. Oh, is that my, I'm going to have to go. Instead of needing to scream no in somebody's face, you can set a boundary without a word. You can
yeah.
simply draw your access. But when you first start it, expect it to be like, and then I embarrassed myself in front of God and everybody in the middle of LA. But thank God it's LA. I walked outside, 5 other people were embarrassing themselves. So
Right. It's like it's fine.
right in.
Like,
And
yeah.
don't ever, when you're learning things, remember it is normal to not be great at it to start, which does involve recognizing, oh, that's the black pit of despair you're talking about over there. I've been with people who have substance abuse problems. And I'll refer to my own past. My ex-husband was a very heavy drinker when I met him, but I did not want to have a relationship with someone who was exhibiting early alcoholism, because my maternal grandmother, who was from Appalachia, by the way, when you said that, I was like, that explains it, because you're one of the people that when I first met you, I was like, huh, I feel a very strange connection to you. Practice a form of folk magic, for a celestial and angelic expression of a celestial and angelic magic that most resembles Appalachian folk magic. In it's a little bit related to hoodoo, but it's really from Appalachian mountains. But that is very, very normal. Is that one of the things, and needing help with it, needing a book to help you understand it. If you never saw it, why do you expect to be able to do it? Unless you learn about it. We have to learn how to cook. We have to learn how to drive. We have to learn how to practice any particular skill that will get us through life. Relationships are like that if you didn't come from the best background. And like we're talking about, like, you're only ever going to try and be above that level. Like, it's better than what I came from. You're always trying to go forward. If you read a book like Bethany is talking about, instead of just getting a little bit above it, you can keep on going until you reach
Going,
the top,
yeah.
and where you
Yeah.
have the real connection, and that doesn't just benefit your love life.
It
It
benefits, it's everything. You can shift it to everything. And I've even seen it like, it's very, I guess it's probably more common with kind of tougher backgrounds, but I've seen it actually on the other side too. I knew some people who came from like almost the opposite of that, where it was just like a very California background, where it was like very like um emotionally supportive, and everything was like very, like everything was very nice, and everyone was really sweet, and everyone's emotions got validated. And they had the problem of like kind of projecting, they weren't able to kind of pick up on if
yeah,
you come from like, yeah, like if you come from a difficult background, you can also, there are some things you're desensitized to, and there's other things that you're like, that is a this type of person. I can feel it. Like
but if you come from a healthy one,
yeah, you might not pick it up, and
expect
you're
other people to inhabit
projecting.
that. You
So they
expect
would get
other
with like these guys that I was like, this dude is like 3000% gonna cheat on you. Like, but they couldn't pick it up because they projected like, oh, he's so wonderful and he's so sweet. Like, and I just remember like, um, there was like, I was friends with one of them, and we were on a trip, and we were at this bar, and this guy, he was kind of like frat boy-esque, I guess, and he was just like wanting this girl's attention, and she was kind of like not paying attention to him, and he just like out of nowhere threw his whiskey glass down, and it just shattered, and he was just being like, and like, he was kind of playing it off like he was joking, but they were like, they just projected like, "Oh, but he's such a nice guy," and I was like, "No, this is, like, a dangerous person." Like, if
reactionary
you
and
weren't paying
explosive
attention to
person.
him, he just smashed a glass, but it was like, it was
It's
hard
not a
for,
Greek wedding, so let's
at
get
a group wedding, we're just at a bar that now this, like, poor person has to come sweep up for him, like, it was just such a red flag, but they hadn't grown up around people that were,
yeah.
you know, dangerous or violent or whatever. And so they just kind of were like, if you haven't been exposed to that, you kind of don't always know
That is very true. That is very
the
true, because it's
possibility.
not just damage that causes a blind spot.
Right. It can be kind of the other side. So the deal breakers, I feel like, are kind of good for everybody. So like if you have an experience like that, you can kind of register, even if you're not entirely sold on like, well, maybe he has his reasons or whatever. Synthetic boundary of like, that is an extreme behavior. Like somebody like breaking a glass because you're not paying attention to them, that's an extreme behavior. Like he was very drunk.
Fine.
He was very drunk. But it was like very indicative of kind of what his expectation, I think, would be of the female demographic, or somebody that he was
He's
interested
throwing a
in.
tantrum. He's a grown-ass man throwing a tantrum. It's not good.
Yeah, because someone wasn't paying enough attention to him, and to me, I think too, what I was trying to portray to them was that, that's also very dangerous in the sense that like he obviously did not care what she thought of him. It was more important what he thought of her.
Who could
And
be
he
harmed
liked
by
her.
buying
He
glass?
liked her. Yeah. So it was like, but so the deal breaker is kind of like you could even set it around, even if you're not entirely sure, you could say like extreme behavior. I'm going to remember that that is out of the realm of what is a normal reaction to something. And I'm going to boundary that and I'm going to deal breaker that so that if that presents, even if I'm not entirely sure what it means, even if I'm not entirely like sold on it, it's like, no, I recognize, like, is this really the kind of behavior that you want in a partner? Do you want to be out at bars and have to clean up after this person because he's upset and throwing glasses? Like, even if you're not entirely sold on all of it, like, you can deal breaker that. You
It,
can
it,
synthetic boundary it, even whatever side of, I guess, if you came from a really good childhood or you came from a really tough one, like this can work for whatever, if you're giving people too many chances because you want to see the good in them or whatever it is, this is giving you the boundary of like, no, I require better behavior than this, or no, I require somebody who's communicative with me, or I require, like, this is what I need. So like I feel like, even on either side of it, I think it's a good process, whether you have, extreme backgrounds or not. I think no matter what, I think it's a great process for everybody to implement.
I think in one of the things when we're talking about glass thrower guy, which like I apologize for like stepping all over. I was just like
I
um,
know. I know.
we're talking about a funnel which starts out big at the top and comes down to a point, and that's exactly what we're talking about. That is at the very top tier of the no, get rid of that, get rid of that.
Yeah, yeah, that's not getting through. Yeah.
This is like on the 0 to 100, that is -2 in terms of what you are willing to accept. But Bethany's book then it takes you through steps about how to make sure that you don't accidentally explain away like the red flag factory, because that thing's not holding a deli sandwich together. That is a red flag. They're distributing them at that particular. But it'll help you hone your skills, and it's not just for things like red flags and overcoming dysfunction or being slightly sheltered, which was the other example that we used. When we go towards relationships, it can take a while to figure out what you really want from one. And that is, honest to goodness, a big part of the reason that I have just stayed single for a long time at this particular point, because after I had recovered from a toxic relationship, and it was really bad, and it took me a while to recover afterwards, that what I after I recovered from that, and I'm like, "Well, I never wanna have a relationship for safety or security or, like, to find my place in this world, and somebody else's family will never be mine." And then I was finally like, so what do I actually why would I have a relationship? And I'm still in that area where it's like, I'm a pretty like rarefied person. I have very particular interests. There are very few people that really hold my interest for very long. And so I simply haven't had a relationship because I don't really know what I would be looking for in one. And that what Bethany's book is talking about is helping you identify what you're looking for in relationships. Which does that mean that you won't have one because you're like, turns out, no, I'm my own best friend. I have a good friendship. I have a good career. I have a happy life. If I stumble across the right person, yay for me. But if I don't, I'm perfectly happy as I am. And learning this toolkit that Bethany has assembled for people, it doesn't mean that you'll stay alone, but it does mean that you won't spend too much of your time figuring out why the person you're with or trying to be with is not the right person for you.
Yeah,
It's a way to foreshorten a learning period.
yeah,
You're getting cliff notes on how to get from the karmic relationship to the divine partnership.
yeah. And that's another section of the book too, because the opposite of the deal breakers is the deal makers. So like what are the things that get you excited? What are the things that you really want to bring in and that are really happy for you and feel really exciting about a partner? And so there's that section as well. And what the funnel also kind of takes you through is the balance of logic meets intuition, logic meets emotion. So you're going step by step to make sure you're incorporating both aspects. And that's something you can even take it and use for jobs. You can use it for friendships. You can use it for whatever. There's a physical component in the funnel, but if you just take that out and substitute, something else. You can use it. It's the same concept of like, and it's a very simple process of like, okay, like if you're using it for jobs or something, for example, you're like, anything, I'm not going to allow for anything below this amount of money because I can't live on it. So that, there you go, deal breaker. And then you're taking that logic, the next step is intuition or emotion of like, okay, well, where would I be really excited to work? What things about a job opportunity would make me really excited? And then you're intuiting, you're doing what I call the vibe check, where you're just
When you
literally
learn in one area, you apply it to others.
right, exactly. And so you're just doing the vibe check as well, where you're just kind of intuiting, okay, what's my vibe of this person, of this job, of this friendship, of this whatever. You're just kind of intuiting that as well. And so that's really the process, because I think where we get really off center is we go too far one way or the other. We let the emotions take the reins. And we've all been there where emotionally we're very tied to somebody, but we don't have a lot else in common, or the logic is off. Or we've been on the other side where they check all of these logic boxes, but you're like, I feel nothing for this person. Like, and it's a balance. It's definitely a balance.
It is okay. So what we're talking about here is genuinely learning how to have a better relationship with yourself and better relationship with other people as well. And it doesn't just apply to romance. Once you learn a skill in one area, you can apply it to others. And Bethany's book is The Secret Energetics of Relationships. Bethany Nicole, BethanyNicole.com is your website, correct?
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
so we're going to close this out today because I think we've said everything that we need to about this topic, but I really am highly recommending this book, particularly for a lot of people who listen to me have struggled with abuse recovery because like energy attracts like energy. I really recommend the book. Where can people find it, Bethany?
It's on Amazon. Yep. It's available on Amazon and Kindle. And yeah, you just type it in. It's also linked on my website. It's on my social media. It's all the places. But yeah, you can just type in The Secret Energetics of Relationships on Amazon and it pops right up.
Okay, and it's an ebook, correct?
It's paperback or Kindle.
Oh,
Either.
that's right. And you know what? I should know that because you showed me the cover at the start of it.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Holographic pink heart on it so that it'll
yeah,
even be cute to have around.
yeah.
Bethany, thank you so much for joining me. I was so excited when I like Bethany is somebody who has been kind enough to come back to talk with me about different relationship dynamics as we try and sort through things, and had mentioned her book, and I'm so happy to have had you here to talk about it, and I really do recommend it, and I thank you so much for your time, Bethany. Is there anything you want to close out with? Is there anything else that you're promoting today?
No, that's pretty much it. There's also always my sessions, which are also based kind of on the book. I do astrological consultation, which is about your birth chart. I do the energetics of relationships as a session where we're just kind of tuning in, and I use a lot of tools to get at kind of what's going on in your relationship. And then I also do astrocartography, which is locational astrology, as its own session.
Oh, how awesome. All right. So that's Bethany's stuff, and you can find me at therisingmoon.com. I help people heal, particularly from trauma. I help people find their life's purpose. It's not that I'm anti relationship, but in particular, since I have a very slightly different focus, if the time has come in your life where that's what you're focusing on, go towards Bethany. She has integrity as well, which is also a very important thing to find in anybody who's helping you in sensitive areas of your life. But you can find me at therisingmoon.com to book me for a tarot card reading or a life coaching session. You can find me at Chromecast at the Rising Moon, where the video versions of these interviews and these segments are. And then you can also find me through Patreon, where I do weekly readings, I do monthly readings. And the focus really is about emotional healing and how to cope and learning how to step into your power so that your own guidance like steps in and takes it on the day to day. And when you really have trust in your intuition, the fear and anxiety goes away because you just learn how to trust yourself. And as I referred to before, one of the things that Bethany's toolkit in the book that she has written will help you do is learn how to reestablish your ability to trust your own judgment, but it gives you a way to check in with it to make sure that you're being true to your own ideals and to your own desires within the relationships that you're pursuing. This has been Logical Magic, examining esoterica. That was the energetics of relationships with Bethany Nicole. Take care, be well, live magically, and find the love that will sustain you.